When trading ICT concepts, there are different order blocks to trade off of, and in today's video, we will cover just that. So in today's video, we're going to cover over multiple different things, which is going to be the different order blocks. All right, so in order to really understand them, you're going to have to be able to identify them first and foremost. All right, so the first one is going to be the original order block. So the original order block usually just forms whenever we're inside some form of consolidation and we sweep some form of manipulation. And this order block usually is the first one before the big move starts to happen, and usually sometimes we will come back down into it, sometimes we won't. That's how usually it is. Second one is going to be the mitigation block, which forms after the original order block has already formed from their consolidation, and then we retrace into the mitigation block, and that would be your entry. And then the third one is going to be the proportion block, which we trace into the mitigation block and formed another order block, and we retrace into that and go higher. All right, so we have the original order block. I know this right here is the big expansion move that created it all, but on the hard time frame, that would be your original order block. For right now, we're going to use the one candle formation, and a means of measuring it is by using the mean threshold. If we respect the mean threshold, then eventually the order block will likely hold, and if we don't, and we get a closure below, then you can use that order block as an inversion PD array. And eventually here, we had this order block right here, and then eventually we had a sell side imbalance, which became an inversion, and that would just boom, order block was respected. It completely respected the order block there, and then eventually it formed a proportion block. After we respected the order block here, it formed another order block, which would be the proportion block. So the proportion block is whenever we have one order block form, and then eventually we respect it and we create another order block. That would be proportion block. Again, here would be your entry, like right here. As soon as you get the closure above and you retest, that would be entry. Your stop loss at the proportion block low, targeting some form of buy side liquidity here, and this would have to be your target right there. This would have to be a change in the state of delivery or an order block, and then eventually you form a proportion block to give you more confirmation. And I believe this one is very, very powerful. All right, so right here we have another really good example, and then eventually you can see the Fibonacci using the mean threshold. You can see the mean threshold was respected nicely. The candles barely closed below, and then eventually we had a buy side imbalance or a balanced price range down here too, to also push us up higher and to respect the bullish order block there. And then eventually you can see price eventually repriced into it. Eventually we formed another proportion block right here. So we used the original order block, and then eventually we had another order block form. This would have to be the mitigation, but since the mitigation was retracing back into this, that formed the proportion block. But yes, as soon as we closed above here, we formed another down close candle, but that one was repricing back into here, which was a buy side imbalance. So that could have been your trade idea there, and you could have targeted some form of buy side liquidity, which could have been right there. So the form of mitigation for me is whenever we're having a continuation off of another PD array. That's the form of mitigation for me. That's how I view mitigation blocks, and I know a lot of other people view it that way. An original order block, again, like I said, usually forms after we have some form of consolidation and we sweep, and then eventually we form that change in the state of delivery there. That is where your original mitigation would have to be. This is a mitigation block right here for me, since we rebalance back into a BISI, and then eventually we would continue it up higher. This would have to be a form of mitigation again, because the original order block is down here that formed that change in the state of delivery. And then eventually we went up higher, and then eventually we were bouncing off of this breaker block, and then eventually we went up higher. So that is a mitigation block to me. What is a proportion block is whenever we rebalance or redeliver into an original order block. What is a mitigation block is whenever we are already in a price lag that is showing a continuation. That's all the mitigation block is to me, is a continuation. A proportion block is redelivery into an original order block. An original order block is the start of a new price move. Okay, here's a perfect example. So this right here, these three down close candles are your original order block, but as for the example here, we're going to use the first one, and then eventually you have that mitigation block, and then eventually you form another mitigation here, but this would have to be your proportion block, and then eventually another one. Here's a perfect example of the mitigation block right here. The mitigation block, again, we're just inside of a price move. We came down and then we went up higher. I wouldn't really count this candle here as in a form of an order block, since we did disrespect it and the body was not really too big. And whenever the bodies aren't too big, we don't really have too much volume, and that means usually sometimes the order block won't be respected if the body isn't big enough. So again, this is a mitigation block, closed above, and then eventually we came and repriced into it, and then we went up higher. Again, for me, mitigation blocks are forms of a continuation order block. An original order block is like a reversal order block, and then a proportion block is a rebalance or redelivery order block. So again, here we have another mitigation block. These down close candles, we're in a continuation move already. It's like just we're having that retracement swing. That's how I view a mitigation block. All it is, it's a retracement swing. This right here is your form of mitigation to me. That's all it is. That mitigation right there is a form of mitigation. You can see we left a breakaway gap there formed. That's how strong the delivery was. And eventually, again, we were redelivering back into a buy side inefficiency. And again here, this is like your original order block. This is the original order block. We had some form of redelivery into an imbalance, and then eventually we formed a mitigation block since we never redelivered into the original order block to form a proportion block. And then eventually you can see we had another mitigation block that eventually we did redeliver into, and this one we never really did. And that just goes to show this is all just a continuation order block, and this is the reversal order block to start the new move in the expansion phase, which would have to be the new price legs. So again here we have the original order block formed, and then eventually we formed a proportion block. Never really retraced back into it, but in this case scenario, once you have those big down close candles, you can just use that as your original order block. And then eventually, just some scenarios, you know, you won't use it, some scenarios you will. And then eventually you have a proportion block since you redelivered into the original, and then you form a mitigation block. You kind of semi-respected since you did have a buy side imbalance below it, and then you went up higher, and then you formed just another proportion block since you delivered into the form of mitigation there, and then you just delivered higher. All right, so we have it here. Mitigation / proportion blocks are continuation order blocks. The original order blocks are reversal order blocks. Proportion blocks form after delivery into a mitigation or original order block. Mitigation order blocks form after delivery into another PD array, not an original order block. So they can redeliver into an imbalance, into a breaker, or some form of inversed array. If you wish on how to find the highest probability order blocks, then make sure to check out the high probability order block video here to give you a better understanding of what makes a high probability order block and how to trade it. So that's pretty much it. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Peace.